Hey guys, today on JD Cars we're going to be installing a MaxJax 2-post lift here in my home garage. So I had this lift delivered a couple days ago and I've been planning for the install here. I just rented a 2-inch rotary hammer from Home Depot for drilling the anchor holes. Your concrete pad does need to have a minimum depth of 4 inches and it does need to be a minimum of 3,000 psi of compression strength. But enough about that, let's get into the install. So the first step here is going to be sliding your bottom plate and cylinder up into the middle of the post. And pull your cylinder down and out so we can easily access it. Grab yourself a 9mm hex drive bit. We're going to remove the cylinder cap. Now come over to your assorted hardware here and grab these two fittings here, this male to female and this male to female elbow. So I was pleasantly surprised to discover here that MaxJax pre-installs Teflon tape on all the fittings. That makes our life really easy here. We're just gonna take our male to female, screw it in here, and tighten it down with a 22mm. Now don't go too nuts tightening this down yet. You wanna leave a little bit of adjustability for when we install this elbow so we can get it properly angled. So now we'll install this elbow here. So as you can see, the elbow has been fully tightened down, but it's facing downward, and we want it to be facing up towards the top of the post, which is why I left that adjustability room in the first fitting here, and we'll continue to tighten it down until this elbow is facing upwards. Repeat this same process on your other post, of course, and then pull your cylinder down and rotate it so that this fitting is accessible through the access hole on the bottom here. So make sure your bottom plate is slid far enough up that you can pull the cylinder out, and then you can maneuver it through this small access hole on the back of the post here. I'll repeat the same process on the other post here. Now I've left these metal shipping brackets on either side of the posts here for this next step of installing the wheels. We're going to pull the posts up, stand them upright on the bracket, and that's going to allow us some extra room to install the wheels. So we'll grab the 4 longest bolts or lock nuts, a 13mm ratchet, another wrench of your choice, and 4 small nylon wheels. Now I'll repeat the same process on the other post. Now I can just pull the posts off the shipping brackets and move them around easily. Alright, just realized we forgot to put on a male to male fitting on the cylinders. We're gonna lay down the posts, pull up the bottom bracket, and we'll turn the cylinder around so we can install that male to male. Alright, so I just forgot to install this male to male fitting. It's nearly impossible to do from the other side. So we'll just install this here and use our adjustable crescent wrench to tighten it down. Alright, so at this point, if you're following your MaxJax instructions, it's probably instructing you to mount your power unit to the cart that you have to assemble, but I am on the clock for this rotary hammer rental, so we're not going to assemble the cart or the power unit right now. We're going to work on getting the post positioned and anchored. So I'll be using this lift both for my small BMW 3 Series for the remainder of the time that I have it, as well as that Subaru Crosstrek, my mom's Mercedes SUV at some point, my dad's BMW 550, and a Jeep Wrangler at some point. So we're going to have a pretty broad range of vehicles, so we do want to set these at a width that's going to accommodate that range of vehicles. So based off of MaxJax recommendations, I think 115 inches will accommodate that range of vehicles pretty well. Additionally, 115 inches here fits pretty nicely. Have a couple inches to spare on either side for connecting our hydraulics and whatnot. So we'll get this measured out, marked, and we'll get the post into position. So from the edge of my concrete slab over by the door, all the way over to our trash cans here, I measured out our usable space to be 19 feet 6 inches. And I've also measured out our center to be 9 feet 9 inches right here. And I've done the same on the other side. Now I'll measure our usable space from this pole to that wall, and then I'll center the 115-inch range that has to fit in between. A nice big level and a square will make your life a lot easier during this process in precisely placing your posts. So because we don't have a flat wall or an edge to base our measurements off over by that pole, we'll be placing this post very precisely using the wall, our square, and the level. And then we use a chalk line to bring over the measurements to the other side. So what I've just done here is using our square and level, I brought our center line mark in over here near our width measurement, and because we have a 14.5-inch base plate on our posts, we can measure out 7.25 inches from the center line. That will mark the left and right side of the post. So as you can see here, using our center line, I brought out 7.25 inches on either side. That covers our width, and using our square, I'll bring this line out to make our life a little easier. Now the depth of our base plate on our post is 13 inches. So using our square, bring a line out. Here's 12 inches right here and 13. All right, so we now have a nice three-sided outline of exactly where the post needs to go, nice and square with the wall. So we'll wheel the post into place. We'll get it nicely lined up with all of our lines here. Then we can begin drilling. So as you can see, our precise measurements paid off. Base plate matches up very nicely all the way around with our measurement lines. And I just checked with our tape measure to make sure we have 5.5 inches from this corner to the wall, as well as on the other side. Now we'll break open this bad boy. Just for some size reference, yeah, this is a huge rotary hammer. So I've marked 2.5 inches of depth using a piece of masking tape on our 5/8 bit, and we're gonna drill a 2.5-inch hole in the rear center hole of the base plate. So at this point, MaxJax instructs you to move the post out of the way, drill your 4.5-inch hole with your 7/8-inch bit, install an anchor, move the column back into place, anchor the post using one of the bolts, and then repeat the entire process for all the holes all the way around. They probably instruct you to do so because they don't want the post moving during drilling, but I'm fairly confident this heavy post won't be moving. So I'm just gonna continue to drill all these pilot holes with the 5/8-inch bit at a depth of 2.5 inches. Then we'll move the post out of the way and use our full-size 7/8-inch bit to drill our 4.5-inch holes. Alright, so we have our pilot holes drilled here. Now I've switched out for our 7/8-inch bit and marked 4.5 inches with some masking tape, and we'll drill these holes. Remember, it is crucial to keep this drill perpendicular to the floor. Don't lean it to either direction. We just gotta keep it nice and straight. With our holes drilled, it's time to grab our shop vac and thoroughly vacuum out the area. It's now time for our first anchor here. So we're gonna take our sacrificial bolt, which is the longest bolt in the kit. There's only one of them. We're gonna thread on the nut, which is also sacrificial, and the one singular smallest washer. And we'll thread our anchor onto the sacrificial bolt. Once the bolt is fully threaded into the anchor, we then need to adjust our nut and washer so that we have 5/8 of an inch of extra room in between the top of the anchor and where the concrete will be. So I set the insertion depth to 5/8 of an inch. We'll insert our anchor here and grab a nice big sledgehammer and tap it into place. So my camera decided not to record that, but it appears my anchor decided to stop short here. probably due to a piece of debris in the hole. Pull out the bolt here. All right, luckily it is slightly recessed from the concrete, so we'll continue to repeat the same process of inserting the sacrificial bolt into the anchor, and after measuring an insertion depth of 5/8 of an inch, we can then insert the anchor and tap it into place with our sledgehammer. Now, to set the anchor, we'll need a 24mm socket or a wrench of your choice to hold the top bolt, and we'll also need a wrench. I'm going to use a crescent wrench to tighten down the hex nut, which is going to cause the anchor to expand. Once you've tightened it down all the way, you can back off the hex nut and remove the sacrificial bolt. Once you've expanded the anchor, it should be 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch from the surface. Mine seems to be closer to 1/4 of an inch. So I'm sure at this point you understand the process of installing your anchors. I will cover it again on the other side, but I am running out of time to get this rotary hammer back to Home Depot. So we do have these holes drilled. I'm gonna roll the post back into place, and we'll transfer over the measurements to the other side and drill the holes for the other post, just in the interest of time, so I can get this rotary hammer back to Home Depot. So we've got all 10 holes drilled for our posts. I'm gonna get this vacuumed up really quick, and I'm gonna run the rotary hammer back to Home Depot before they close. Depending on the time I get back, I might have to continue this tomorrow, but I am glad we made the progress of drilling our holes and getting our posts set up for installation. Alrighty, next day here, and I've installed all the anchors on this side, as you can see, and we'll now begin working on installing anchors for this post here. I've switched over to using 3 of these much more heavy duty washers because that small one failed after installing just the first anchor. Using 3 of these provides a lot more support. So just a little recap here. Take an anchor, we have our sacrificial bolt, install our nut and 3 washers. We then screw this in, measure the insertion depth to be 5/8 of an inch, pound the anchor in until the washers are making contact with concrete, and then we tighten down this nut while holding the bolt still until the anchor has been dragged up to 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch from the surface of the concrete. With all of our anchors installed here, it's now time to install the post and anchor in place with the included hardware. Included are 5 2-inch bolts, 5 washers, and 10 shims for each side. We're going to use these shims underneath the base of the post in case there's any unevenness in the concrete or in the base of the post itself. You'll need a 15/16 socket to tighten these down. So we'll get the post into place, perfectly lined up with each of the anchors. So at this point, before we anchor it down with the bolts, we want to grab a shim, stick it under the plate. If you can fit 1 underneath, pull it out, grab a second shim, see if you can fit 2 under there. Looks like we can just barely fit 2. Make sure it's lined up with the anchor and the hole, and continue to do so around the plate. Once the base is shimmed, we can take our bolt and washer and install it in the anchor, and proceed to do so all the way around the perimeter. At this point, we need to take our 15/16 socket and a torque wrench, and we need to torque each of the bolts down to the manufacturer's recommended 95 foot-pounds of torque. Alright, with our 2 posts installed here, it's now time to begin assembling our power unit cart, which will begin with these 2 arms on either side. You want to make sure you have the 4 holes that are spaced out a larger difference on the bottom and the smaller ones on the top here near the handles. We'll be assembling it using 6 Phillips head bolts and 6 10mm nylon lock nuts. We'll now be using the same hardware to attach this plate to the bottom of the cart, which has our axle and bottom plate for mounting. Now we install our 2 wheels on the cart, and we secure them using these C-clips. Now lay the cart down on its back like so. Grab your power unit Put the rubber divider in place, and then put the unit over the divider. And then secured in place with the included hardware. This bolt is a 14mm and the nut is a 13mm. Now using the same hardware, we need to install this flow divider just above the power unit on the bracket there. Just a word of advice, grab yourself some gloves because it is probably covered in hydraulic fluid. You can see there are 2 plugs on this side and 1 plug on the right side. You want your 2 plugs on the left side when facing the unit and 1 plug on the right side when facing the unit. This divider is going to take the hydraulic fluid from the unit and divide it evenly to the 2 posts. Now I'll come to the left side of the unit here and remove the 3 red plugs. Now I'll take this right angle fitting and install it on the divider on the hole labeled in, and we'll tighten it down so it's facing downward, and we'll install another right angle fitting down here on the reservoir. Get it facing in the upward position here. We'll tighten it down after we install this hose. We'll start on the bottom here, thread this hose on. We won't tighten it down just quite yet. Then we'll get the top threaded on to the divider unit. You can tighten both of these down with a 19mm. Now that the hose is in position, we can tighten down this 19mm nut on the bottom of the unit. At this point, we can take our quick connect fittings, disconnect them from each other, and we're going to install the male fitting onto the post, and then we'll install the female fitting onto the hoses. Now the last connection we have to make here before we can put hydraulic fluid in the unit is attaching each of the hoses to the divider unit up top here. Once you've done that, your power unit is completely assembled, and you can hook your hoses right in the back of the unit here so that they're not dragging on the ground. Now all that's left to do is install the arms on the lift posts, and then we'll put some hydraulic fluid in the power unit and begin bleeding the cylinders. So we'll grab our lift arms, our 2 pins, and the safety C-clips. We'll bring our lift arm into place here, drop the pin into place, and to secure this pin in place, we're supposed to install a C-clip from the side here, like so. I personally don't think that this 5-pound pin is gonna come up and out of the arm. I will install them though, just to be safe. Alright, I've cleaned up the space a bit here. We're gonna take the hoses from the power units and run them out to each post and connect them via the quick connector. We have to fill this up with 7 quarts of hydraulic oil. I'm gonna use this paint mixing cup, which is a quart, to take our hydraulic fluid, and I'm gonna pour it into our no spill funnel. This is an awesome funnel, by the way. It has a ton of attachments for every application, so I'll leave a link in the description for that. So we'll take 7 ounces, put it in here, and then we'll begin bleeding the cylinders. Now with the unit plugged in and 7 quarts of hydraulic oil in the reservoir, it's time for the initial bleeding. So we're going to press the button until the lift raises up to approximately 24 inches, which is roughly this first safety lock hole on the post here. So stop once the lift is just above that. So now with the lift up at 24 inches here, we're gonna take a 3/16 Allen key, and you're gonna come to the top of the cylinder here and loosen the bleeder screw. Don't remove it all the way, but loosen it enough until you can hear air coming out. And we're gonna bleed the system of all the air until we have a steady flow of hydraulic fluid coming out, which obviously you're gonna want a rag to soak up. Alright, so the next step here is going to be taking a 12mm and loosening all 4 of these bolts on either side of the restraining mechanisms here. And you're going to want to press it firmly up against these gears here so it's a firm fit and there's little to no movement in the arm. And apply some white lithium grease to those gears there. Additionally, you want to apply some white lithium grease to the inside track here. You can see I added a couple beads on either side, put a substantial amount on top of each block just to ensure the lift operates smoothly. You do want to take a measurement from this top hole to the other top hole and then double check. And then double check from the middle of the lift that that's the same distance to make sure your posts aren't at an angle. And lastly, we do have to add 1.5 quarts to the reservoir here because running the fluid through the hoses and into the cylinders as well as bleeding did deprive the reservoir of some of its fluid. So that completes the installation of this MaxJax 2-post lift. I have lots more exciting content coming soon, so please leave a like below and subscribe if you've yet to do so, and I'll see you next time on JD Cars.